No, I'm not going to run out of disasters. Pick up the daily newspaper, which is my best source for crisis stories, and you'll find 10 or 15 every day. People chase fire engines, flock to car crashes. People thrive on tragedy. It's unfortunate, but in my case, it's fortunate. The bigger the tragedy, the bigger the audience. These words might sound crass on the surface, but they're undeniably correct when put into the context of who said them. For this quote came from one of film and TV's super producers, a man whose mere name came to be synonymous with disaster, though not in the same way usually discussed on this podcast. The quote, taken from a 1977 interview, was from the mouth of Irwin Allen. The son of poor Russian immigrants, Allen was born in New York City in 1916 and raised in the same city. While he would ultimately major in journalism at Columbia, he was forced to drop out due to financial difficulties caused by the Great Depression. This didn't stop him from moving to Hollywood in 1938 and getting involved in both print journalism, editing his own magazine and writing a popular syndicated gossip column, and radio, producing his own programs. His success in these fields allowed him to eventually transition to producing television and film, working for both RKO and Warner Brothers until, in 1960, he made the jump to the company where he would really make his name, 20th Century Fox. There, he would co-write, produce, and direct 3 popular sci-fi films, The Lost World, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and 5 Weeks in a Balloon. He then parlayed the success of those movies into a boom period during the mid-60s, when he produced 4 popular overlapping sci-fi TV shows for 20th Century Fox: Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, based on his earlier movie, The Time Tunnel, Land of the Giants, and a 4th that would go on to arguably be second only to Star Trek in terms of most iconic sci-fi shows of the 60s, but more on that in a moment. While producing these shows, Allen would pioneer what would come to be known as the Irwin Allen rock and roll, a filming technique in which the camera would be shook and actors would throw themselves around the set to simulate the ship they were in being tossed around or rocked by explosions. And while this remains a time-honored technique still used by numerous low-budget productions even today, Allen's biggest mark on the pop culture landscape would come in the 70s, when he would produce and direct the action scenes for The Poseidon Adventure and Towering Inferno, 2 of the most successful disaster movies of all time. Allen, who would then jump back to Warner Brothers after a change in management at Fox, would soon come to be known as the Master of Disaster, following his Fox hits with a string of WB disaster films for both the big and small screen. Movies like Flood, Fire, Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, The Swarm, Hanging by a Thread, about friends stranded in a loose cable car hanging above a ravine, and When Time Ran Out, about a volcanic eruption. It's true that Allen's later disaster films failed to capture the box office success or critical respect of his earlier efforts, and by the time his TV films The Night the Bridge Fell Down and Cave-In aired in the early 80s, he was awarded a dubious Worst Career Achievement trophy from the infamous Razzie Awards. But Allen's mark on the industry was undeniable, and while he passed away in 1991 and was therefore unable to witness the giant resurgence of the disaster film that CGI brought on in the 90s, with films like Independence Day, Twister, Dante's Peak, Volcano, Deep Impact, and Armageddon, his spirit could certainly be felt in the movies. And, if not there, then it could certainly be felt in another 90s movie inspired by his work, this time even more directly. A big-budget remake of that aforementioned but unnamed iconic 60s sci-fi series. Perhaps it's ironic, then, that the critical and box office results that awaited would be considered a different kind of disaster. The year is 1998, and New Line Cinema is ready to launch the next big sci-fi action franchise with Lost in Space. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. And I know we're lost in space, Trev, but I gotta ask you, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. Had 2 sandwiches today,
Nice. A Joey special?
Yeah, the Joey special, yeah. To prep for our movie today. Very exciting. Back to one of our favorite decades in this podcast, one we visited many, many times. And I know we'll talk about that decade for sure during this episode. It's also the second installment of our now annual Failure to Franchise with Trev and Chris-tmas.
Yes.
And this is, of course, where we gift each other movies that are, part of our very long list of films we eventually want to cover on here. The last episode, you were kind enough to gift me Batman Mask of the Phantasm, not only because you hadn't seen it and wanted to finally watch a classic, and it was only 70 minutes, but of course to also pay tribute to Kevin Conroy. And in this installment, similarly, I wanted to pay tribute to the passed away movie career of Matt LeBlanc. So, no, the reason I, of course, gifted you, as we talked about when I initially gave this one to you as a gift, is this is one of the, I don't want to say rare occasions, but it's not super often on here where, I guess that does make it rare. What am I talking about? One of the rare occasions
You just defined the word rare.
Yeah, I did. This is one of the rare occasions where this is actually a movie that you have way more experience with, both in terms of the film itself, but also even the source material.
Yes.
And I thought this would be a movie that would kind of scratch a nostalgic itch for you, and it would be a first-time watch for me.
Yeah.
And that is 1998's Lost in Space. Tell us a little bit about it, Chris.
Sure. It is directed by Stephen Hopkins. He was most famous for directing Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, Predator 2, and The Ghost in the Darkness. He's had kind of a prolific career in TV since then. But this was written by Trev's favorite person, Akiva Goldsman, who wrote Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. He's wrote a lot for Ridley Scott, and he's in charge of New Trek. So he's kind of one of the guys.
Yeah. Oddly enough, in charge of the best one.
Yeah, totally. So I guess he is kind of your. You know what? You actually do like him more than I thought.
No, I will. We'll talk about Akiva Goldsman for sure during this episode.
Good.
Yeah, because I have thoughts. Yeah.
This has a budget of $80 million. Domestically, it made $69 million. Nice. Worldwide, it made $136 million. And we gotta say that this is obviously based on the 1965 series by Irwin Allen of the same name. So this is kind of one of those 90s things, was taking an old 60s or 70s property and now creating a cinematic reboot of the same name. So it kind of, there's a trend here which we will definitely get into.
Yeah, and I think there's also other elements of this that are evocative of other 90s trends, which certainly I want to talk about. But Chris, let's not to beat around the bush here. So as I kind of alluded to earlier, the main reason I picked this film was in numerous previous episodes of this podcast, you would be telling some story about your childhood, and you kept mentioning Space, the Imagination Station, correct?
Yes.
That's what it's called, right? Yep. Which sounded to me like the Canadian version of the Sci-Fi Channel here in the States. And you would just mention how you would watch a lot of the older sci-fi shows on there and kind of more probably current stuff. But one show you kept mentioning was Lost in Space. So you are obviously very familiar with the 1965 show. So I want to hear from you a little bit about that, and then I'll talk about what I know about the show, just more from pop culture osmosis. I'm sure. I was trying to think about that earlier today. Have I ever seen an episode in total? And I kind of doubt it. But I know I've seen chunks, because that was also, just as I'm sure was the case with you in Space, it was definitely rerun on Sci-Fi Channel when I was younger. And I know I came across it. But I'll talk more about what I know about it. But I really want to hear from you, because I'm guessing one of the main reasons you went and saw this movie when you did, or why you were interested in it, was your childhood affinity for the show. So tell me about your relationship with the original series.
Funnily enough, me and Trev have been friends for close to it. Almost, oh man, are we going up for a decade soon? We're getting up there, aren't we?
We should probably figure that out, yeah.
We're getting close.
Well, there's a difference between how long we've known each other and how long we've been friends.
Right, so 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. Stupid joke. But it's funny because we've been friends for so long, and oddly enough, we've never had this discussion even in private. Typically,
that is weird, because that's one of the first things people usually do when they meet is talk about Lost in Space and how how familiar they are with it.
Exactly. That's usually my in when I'm hitting on somebody. That's actually how I got my girlfriend. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. So I have quite a long history with this show. My dad he emigrated. Him and his family emigrated from Italy to France, and then immigrated to Canada at a very young age, at like 4 or 5 years old. And this show was broadcast to Europe, and it was quite large in Europe, actually. And it was one of my dad's favorite shows because it just kind of blew his mind at that time. In 1965, watching it new, everybody in France and Italy thought that robot was real. It was a pretty big deal that people thought that this robot, voiced by Dick Tufeld, everybody thought that this robot was a living entity. It was just kind of what we like to say movie magic, but on the TV form. And so,
I mean, not to be mean about your family, Chris, but that makes them kind of sound dumb that they thought the robot was alive.
Are you making fun of immigrants, Trev?
Oh no! I take it back.
So anyway, when I was growing up, my dad used to talk about this old show all the time, Lost in Space, and how much he loved it. And then when I was in elementary school, I would always wake up before going to school, and I would watch Three's Company and Lost in Space. So I think I've seen both of those series, actually. I think I've seen every single episode of both of them. And yeah, it just kind of captured my imagination. It was silly at the time. It was campy. The show's premise, I guess, for people that aren't familiar with it, is it's a family of the Robinson family, based off the Swiss family Robinson, obviously. But it's like a space version. The world, or Earth, is overpopulated. So the Robinson family is off to brave new adventures to find a new colonization, a new planet for Earth to keep going. And a lot of the obviously they get lost in space, haha, but they get marooned on a couple planets throughout the series, and a lot of the comedy and silliness surrounded three characters. Dr. Smith, played by Jonathan Harris. The robot, just like I said, was played by Dick Tufeld. And then Will Robinson, a young Will Robinson, played by Bill Mummy. Or Mummy. I don't know how to say his name. Shows what fan I am. There's also other members of the Robinson family. There's Dr. John Robinson, played by Guy Williams, who's the father. Dr. Maureen Robinson, played by June Lockhart, which is the mother. Major Don West, he's a military pilot, played by Mark Goddard. Judy Robinson, played by Marta Kristen, she is the oldest sibling. And then Penny Robinson, played by Angela Cartwright, she is the younger daughter. So it was always kind of explained to be like a Brady Bunch in space. So it's that vibe, it's that silliness. The first season was in black and white. Yeah.
Can I tell you, like, in the little bit of research I did on this, because I didn't want to do too much, because I wanted you to really take the reins on this one. But can I tell you the two things that surprised me the most that I learned in doing research?
Yep.
Is I did not know the first season was in black and white. Of course, in my mind, that's just a color show, because it just, every time you think of Lost in Space, you think about that campy 60s look with the very bright, very colorful look that's very evocative of, like, TOS Star Trek, which had been in the same kind of time period, and of course the 60s Batman show. So I didn't realize any of it was in black and white. But I was also very surprised to hear, and I want to get your take on this as someone who's seen a lot of it.
Sure.
My, of course, perception in my mind as someone who's never watched it, but has probably just seen scenes and is aware of it, definitely Danger Will Robinson, that's the thing everyone knows. And to read that the first two seasons were entirely confined to just two planets.
Yeah.
I just assumed it was like Trek, where they were hopping around space and going to so many different planets and on all these different adventures. It was kind of surprising to me, and I'm sure it was a budget thing.
Yeah.
But it was very shocking to hear that Lost in Space was really just, for the first two seasons, marooned on this planet.
Yeah. And I think we're going to talk about the movie, obviously, but there's a lot of perception going into the film Lost in Space where I think people had either forgotten what the TV show was like or just weren't familiar with it, like yourself. Because, yeah, exactly. You think Lost in Space, you're just, going from planet to planet, world to world, adventure to adventure. But no, yeah, they are completely marooned for 2/3 of the show. When it does become colored, it's kind of a shock, when it all happens. They're brightly colored costumes and uniforms. It's honestly a little off-putting, if I'm not gonna lie. Like, if I'm being honest, being familiar with the first season, especially at a young age, and then watch season 2 and 3, it was almost like the campiness just kind of explodes on screen at that point, right? It becomes, like you said, the old Star Trek series, and then the Brady Bunch. But yeah, I just was always fascinated with the show. Great, fun characters. Like I said, it was mostly the trio of the robot, the little guy, Will Robinson, and the kooky scientist. Yeah, the kooky doctor. Yeah, this is just a really fun show. Each episode,
and we should mention too, like the Dr. Smith you're talking about, because it's very important, and we'll just get out of the way now.
Sure.
Like the idea behind his character was he was the saboteur, correct?
Yes.
Who was like he's the one who screwed up the mission, but then he gets stuck on the ship with them. And so, like you said, like from what I understand, like the comedy obviously comes from they're basically stranded on these planets or lost in space, as you would say, with an enemy of theirs. But he has to help them, and so that's the comedy. Correct?
Well, there's really no mystery. That's what's interesting, is that like they have a saboteur or a spy, but they know it.
Yeah.
And it's not like this, the finale. They're like, oh my God, Dr. Smith was bad the whole time. They know, and they just got to deal with this fucking guy.
Yeah.
Right. Each episode of the old show cost $130,000. And at the time at our time, that's well over $1 million an episode. So it was very, very pricey. Mm-hmm. And something I learned doing the research all these years later, Trev. First and foremost, I'm a score whore, okay? I had no idea that the great John Williams does the main title for Lost in Space. Yeah. I had no idea. That
I didn't
great
either
little
until
tune.
I just learned that too.
Yeah, it was very cool. Very cool. So yeah, that's kind of my history with the show. That's why I was excited for the movie. I was 10 years old when the movie came out, so me and my dad obviously went to it. I got the DVD. My mom, because we were so young, right? We didn't have jobs at 10 years old. I don't know what Americans tell you guys about how Canadians get their money. We're all fur trappers at 6. But
you were out there already tapping maple trees.
Yeah, exactly. But my mom came home one day and was like, to me, my brother, and my sister, and goes, "Okay, I bought a DVD, but I can't decide which one you want." So she brought home Lost in Space and Lion King 1.5. So we chose Lost in Space. Me and my brother, vetoed my sister, and here we are.
Did you see Lost in Space in the theater though, as a kid?
I did, yes, yeah. I was there with my dad in like the first couple weeks, yeah. So I actually still own that DVD today. I don't throw out anything like when it comes to movie stuff, so I still have that DVD today.
So can I tell you what I know about Lost in Space? Because there's to me, there's one very interesting thing about like my relationship with it, or just like I said, what I would pick up through cultural osmosis. Mm-hmm. It is one of those shows that I think, and I think this is still the case. It's hard to kind of figure out and suss if it was like a huge hit when it was on. Like, you can look at the fact that it had 3 seasons, but so did Star Trek, and I know Star Trek always struggled in the ratings, and just kept getting renewed, and then eventually became a cult hit later. And right. I don't have a perception if that was also the case with Lost in Space, or if it was like an immediate smash sensation.
Right.
But it is one of those shows that has just always held on in the pop culture. For maybe just like, how catchy the title is, definitely for the robot. So like one of the big things I knew as a kid was the robot, because that robot would cameo in so many other things. You see him in Gremlins. Like Joe Dante is like a big Lost in Space guy, so he'd have that robot pop up a lot. And it was like, and I knew I would watch on Sci-Fi Channel specials about people who collect sci-fi memorabilia, and obviously the robot is something I believe I think Bob Burns had it in his like famous basement of sci-fi memorabilia. Right. So it's just, I was definitely aware of the robot and the Danger Will Robinson catchphrase, and then I definitely had like a perception of the whole Dr. Smith element. Mm-hmm. And I think where that comes in, there's 2 things I want to talk about with that. One of them is that, and this would be when I was about 15, there was the great cartoon Freakazoid from Steven Spielberg.
Right, yes.
Which was like a parody of superhero, it's kind of like The Tick, right, a little bit, but even like a more bizarre, manic version of a superhero parody. And Jonathan Harris, who had played Dr. Smith, played a character on the show. He played like a professor who would sometimes help Freakazoid. And obviously, as Jonathan Harris is, prone to do, he played it very kind of over the top, very kind of snide and sarcastic. But they would make a lot of jokes in the show about, hey, aren't you that guy from that show with the kid and the robot? And he'd always get really annoyed. So they were like kind of doing nods to Lost in Space there. But I think this is true, and this is what I find interesting. Whatever age I was when I probably first came across Lost in Space or started reading about it, starting being very aware of it, in my mind, I think that my understanding of Jonathan Harris's performance as Dr. Smith was one of the first times that I was introduced to the idea of camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The idea of something being like like intentionally over the top and intentionally cheesy, and that being like the vibe, and you being like allowed to kind of laugh at it and like, oh, they're in on the joke, right? Yep. As a kid, I was aware that was what made that character interesting and like why people like that character. And so I think, honestly, I do think Jonathan Harris and Dr. Smith was my introduction to that concept, which obviously now I love. And that's, because I was one of those kids who, I was 8 when the Tim Burton Batman came out. And around that time, my parents introduced me also to the 60s Batman. And just like liking it on its face, just being totally. Like, this is fun. It's a Batman show where he's punching people and it's got the, the thwack and the pow and everything. And not realizing it was campy until like a little later. But I do think when I started like kind of hearing about Lost in Space and reading about it, that's when I was really introduced to that concept.
And I think that just shows the testament to it being so well beloved or sticking in people's minds of all ages. Right. It's the camp aspect is there and very much on the nose for adults, but it also gives, like Dr. Smith also gives for the child just some kind of weirdo, and you as me as the kid watching it, I'm Will Robinson, right? I'm hanging out with my robot. And then this weird guy, he's just like is along for the ride, and he's like, oh, the pain, and he's always just fucking complaining all the time, and it's just a fun dichotomy to have like this older guy annoying and scared of everything, but yet the young boy being the one that's like courageous and the one to get us out of things, the genius, right? So no wonder people who did grow up with the show latched on to the show, and they were so smart to mold most story arcs on that trio. Right. I can't really say that enough, that was the big selling point of the show.
And I just want to do a really quick self-correction here, Chris, that I just realized as I was looking up something before the letters start pouring in. I said that the robot from Lost in Space was in Gremlins. Sorry, that was actually Robbie the robot from Forbidden Planet. But as I look at this, I wasn't technically wrong, because Robbie the robot apparently guest starred on Lost in Space and fought Robot.
Yes, he did.
So, yeah.
Yes, I think in the black and white, I think in season 1.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
so to me, and that's another thing too. And I don't know if maybe that's the case with you also, but the Lost in Space robot and Robbie the robot are so interchangeable in my head. They're like very similar in design and just in like, and also in their just pop culture kind of.
I think for sure in pop culture for sure. Yeah, it's that iconic voice. The voice of Robot from Lost in Space is really, really something else. And we'll get into that with the movie for sure. Yeah. For sure.
Well, so I guess we should start talking about the movie. And you alluded to this earlier, and I think that's the perfect way to get into it, because, as you said, the show definitely did hold on. Even after, it only lasted 3 seasons, but it held on in the kind of awareness and the pop culture, zeitgeist. And I know after the show went off the air, I know Bill Mummy, or Mummy, that's because like you, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Let's just I'll go with Mummy and you go with Mummy. How about that?
Sure.
I know Bill Mummy like kind of kept the fandom alive. He, they did some TV specials about Lost in Space. I know he wrote like a sequel comic book. So I was even aware of that stuff growing up. I do kind of vaguely remember when that comic book came out, and being like, oh, it's like written by the kid from the show. But whatever the case, like this show held on through the 70s and through the 80s into the 90s when, as you talked about, maybe we can just briefly discuss this, Hollywood got like old TV fever. They could not wait to like pick up so many old TV shows and make movies of them. And we saw it, in the 90s from The Addams Family and Car 54, Where Are You? Let's see, what else?
Mission Impossible, Flintstones, yes. Brady Bunch, Wild Wild West, which is an episode of ours. Go back and listen. Yeah. The Avengers came out after this too. Not Marvel's Avengers, but no, the other one. There was so many. Dennis the Menace, and all this. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Leave It to Beaver, I think even got one. Yeah. So Lost in Space, I get it. Like in the '90s, like you look at that property, and obviously they're probably also thinking about like what was the other big '60s sci-fi space show besides Star Trek? Lost in Space. Well, we know Star Trek has been a popular film franchise, so maybe Lost in Space can as well. So I think this is kind of like, you can maybe talk more about this, Chris, but I think the path to like the big screen was kind of a long one for this movie. I think, wasn't this, they were trying to get a Lost in Space movie made for quite some time, correct?
Yeah, there was some handoffs with the rights, and then getting things together, it just became so pricey. I think that's the biggest part of it was that just budgets were ballooning at the time. And, $80 million in 2022 doesn't sound like a lot of money. But back in the mid-90s, when New Line took over and decided to make the film, that was the most expensive movie that they had ever greenlit. So this is before Lord of the Rings. This is before all that. And $80 million was a ton of money to sink into this property, which, again, is based off 60s show, 3 seasons, still, yes, in the cultural pantheon, but this is new Star Wars at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder, I didn't see this in any of my research, and maybe you have some awareness of this, but I wonder if there was ever at any point in the discussion about this movie any thought of making it like a sequel to the show. Picking up, because I'm guessing the show did not end with them getting back to Earth. I'm guessing it just ended with them still out in space.
Yeah, it did.
And obviously this cast was still floating around. Like I said, they were doing conventions and still promoting the show and seemingly very proud of it. I wonder if that was ever came up in consideration, or if it was just always, well, no, we have to reboot this. We have to start over.
It's got to be more that it was going to be a reboot, because we will talk about this, but almost all of the surviving cast members actually cameo in the film. In actually kind of nice little cameos, which we'll get to, and I want to talk about that for sure, especially in the realm of modern filmmaking in nowadays. But they are still old though. I hate to sound so callous about it, but it's hard to start your multi-million-dollar Star Wars new franchise with a bunch of 65-year-olds.
Well, the comparison I was thinking in my head when I asked that question was, of course, the Star Trek movies.
Yes.
Because, that's a movie franchise that starts with your entire main cast, like, heading into their 50s and 60s, right? And just, like, that's what's very unique about that movie, about the movie series, because it's about an older crew. And, in fact, the through line of Kirk throughout those movies is he's supposed to be an admiral now, not a captain. But I realize that's kind of different when you're talking about a family.
Yeah,
because
totally.
The problem is, as you just said, from what I understand, if Will is all grown up, you really lose the kid as an identifier for your young audience.
Yes.
And that's obviously an insurmountable problem for this franchise.
Yeah. But New Line was hell-bent on making this gigantic franchise. Just the exposure when it comes to promo was huge. They had a toy line, which I actually owned many of. I owned the robot. Obviously. Me and my robots, Trev, it had book tie-ins, it had branded phone cards, Altoids had branded their cases, like their mint cases on Lost in Space, and then Long John Silver took over a food deal as well. So in the lead up to this release and in the midst of production, New Line was hedging their bets. Lost in Space was going to be the big success. And obviously it wasn't, because here we are.
No offense to all those LJS fans out there, but if Long John Silver's is the best, fast food tie-in you're getting, you're already got some problems. The writing might be on the wall there.
Well, let's defend that a little bit. Little Caesars was signed on to do their tie-ins, but then they dropped out, and then there was $100 million lawsuit with New Line versus with Little Caesars. So pizza my ass. Yeah, and a lot of the marketing going into this film was, which we will talk about how I feel about that especially, but the marketing going into this film and seemingly most 90s cinematic TV reboots this was gonna be cool. This was going to be badass. This was going to be edgy and dark. And, and that's kind of the weird fascination that happened in the 90s, that all of a sudden these campy TV shows were being marketed before that they were coming out as being like, hey, we ain't your grandpa's Lost in Space.
Yeah, and it continued into the early 2000s as well. 'Cause,
Yes.
you think of like the early X-Men movies when they didn't want him in the multicolored spandex. They even make a joke about the movie. Instead, they put him all in black leather, and we see that with Lost in Space as well. And
That's one thing. I have to. Sorry to cut you off, but I have to say that just tells you how many times we talk about this. That Lost in Space is like right in the midst of that. Yeah. Which means Hollywood didn't learn nor incept the idea in this film. You know what I mean? Like this movie was a catastrophic failure financially, and some would say critically. And still, Hollywood was like, get Wolverine in black leather now. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's just funny how that works.
In that case, it worked. So, you never
That's true.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you never know, I suppose, but, you do try to track, does this all come from Batman 89? Is that the thought? You look at, okay, because the way Hollywood thinks, not realizing that Batman 89 was really, I understand it was kind of seen as an answer to the 60s Batman show by many, like, oh, this attempt to kind of reclaim Batman. But you have to remember that in between the 60s Batman and that movie, there was decades of comic book work that had also started to push Batman in a more mature territory. Mm-hmm. So by the time you get to Batman 89, really it feels like it's more of a response to the work Frank Miller had been doing in the comics and other authors. So It kind of like made sense. There was like a nice, buttress there in between.
Yeah.
With Lost in Space, I could easily see a Hollywood executive saying, well, they took that one campy 60s show and made a really dark, gritty movie. That's probably what we should do too. Mm-hmm. Instead of embracing, what seems like everything kids of that time and audiences who are still into the show probably loved about the property. Yep. To kind of push it in that dark and gritty territory. That was definitely my main awareness of this show, and I'll talk more when we get into the review about like my memory of when this came out or anything. But my
the
main
movie,
awareness
the movie.
Sorry, my main awareness of the movie at the time when it came out, because this came out, I was 17, 18. There's definitely in my seeing the trailers and just being like, oh, I get it. They're doing the dark and gritty Lost in Space. And we'll even talk about if that's really the case when you watch the movie. But that's certainly the way it was marketed, and certainly the visual, at least, approach to it.
Yeah, 100%. And it sounds like we're getting pretty close to talking about the film proper. So let's run through a little bit of this cast here, because I mean, like you said, the film career of Matt LeBlanc starts and ends here. So let's talk a little bit about Matt LeBlanc playing Don West, Major Don West, the military leader of this show. Movie.
Well, obviously, when Friends blew up, there was going to be a kind of an attempt to turn all 6 of the main cast into movie stars, and we saw that approach with all of them to varying levels of success. Matt LeBlanc has not made many movies, as you point out. He did have one leading role, like kind of significant leading role before us with Ed. And that was, I believe, the first one coming off of his Friends' success. And, you can kind of get a sense of that's very much like his agents being like, you got to go make a cute, like, animal movie that'll get, a new audience. And then Lost in Space was definitely can we turn Matt LeBlanc into a big Hollywood action star?
Yeah.
Right. What I found interesting is in doing my research, Chris, there was a little bit of a hiccup in the journey to Matt LeBlanc playing Major Don West. In that apparently initially they offered the role to his friend's co-star Matthew Perry.
No shit.
Which in my head is just so bizarre.
Yeah,
like,
very.
Nothing about that character, seems to disagree with Matthew Perry. Like Matthew Perry, the movies he chose to jump into, in his like I'm trying to be a movie star Friends period, were actually the right calls for him. He just played variations of Chandler, and things like the whole 9 yards and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But this is
Spanglish.
Yeah, but then they actually, this one you might know, they did at first for Major Don West cast Sean Patrick Flannery.
Yes.
He was cast and like ready to go, and then they kind of got worried because when they put him up against William Hurt, who they had cast as the father, I'm already forgetting his name.
John Robinson.
John Robinson. I knew it was Robinson, but I didn't know it was Robbie Robinson. I don't know, whatever. Dr. Robinson.
Robbie the Robot Robinson.
They felt Sean Patrick Flannery just looked too much like William Hurt, and they were like, this is the one guy on the ship who's not supposed to be part of the family. We need to make sure that's clear. Yeah. So he gets booted out, and then they go to Matt LeBlanc. But yeah, the failure of this movie, it's weird because, obviously I would say, well, I don't know. I don't know that's a movie that has the main character. I would say, the audience identifier character of the show certainly sounds like Will Robinson. I know Gary Oldman, I believe, is top billed as Dr. Smith here, but it's like it seems like the marketing was pretty heavily built around Matt LeBlanc, and he was being pushed as like the leading man of this movie. And it really seems to me like, and we'll talk about whether or not it's deserved, but yeah, I feel like he really bears the brunt of the failure to this in like Hollywood's eyes, because this is pretty much it for him as a leading man. Like he's only made a few movies since, and it's been pretty much, supporting roles like his like him in the Charlie's Angels movies, which he's great in those, but he's just playing a variation of Joey. Right? This is really the only time he really steps outside of his comfort zone in movies.
Yeah. And I mean, again, you can't blame the marketing team. You can't blame Friends was at this time the biggest thing. It's it's Thursday night on NBC. Everybody knows the Friends. And I was looking at interviews of Matt LeBlanc back in the day, in the UK, doing the circuit, right? And he definitely, well, mind you, Matt LeBlanc, as me and you are big Friends fans. Matt LeBlanc is very, very soft spoken. It's actually kind of shocking how soft spoken he is. It's almost like,
he's not Joey.
Yeah, is this man like breathing sometimes? Because he is really, really introverted, and I mean that's testament of how good of a job he does as Joey. But even back in the day, you can see that he is, I don't want to say out of his depth. That's not what I mean. But he's definitely wowed and kind of being thrown to the Hollywood wolves. And he doesn't, I don't want to say he doesn't feel comfortable, but you can definitely see that this is a TV star that is really stepping out of his comfort zone. Yeah. And I mean, we'll talk about his performance, but yeah, it's just a very interesting, he's just had a very interesting career, honestly.
Well, it's interesting because like not only is he getting that treatment, right? It's the Taylor Kitsch, John Carter, and Battleship of like coming from a TV show and suddenly being like, you got the weight of the world on your shoulders because we want you to carry this franchise, right? But so he's getting thrust into that with not too much movie experience, but he's also getting put in there with a very, very experienced, prestigious cast.
Yes.
So we should talk about the rest of the cast because this is actually a very, very impressive cast. I mean, every significant member of this cast except for one is someone who is still known today and are quite well regarded in their fields to varying degrees. So let's talk about them, and let's start with the other name I mentioned, top billed as Dr. Smith, Gary Oldman.
Yeah, and what can be said about Gary Oldman? We've talked about him in the past. We talk about him privately, publicly. The man is one of the greats, the great, just all-encompassing actors on the planet. Since the beginning of film, basically. He's in the top echelon. And to get a pull like him is really, really impressive. And then
apparently he pursued it, right? Because he said he wanted to be in a family movie.
Yes, and really liked the script too. This is one of these moments where a big Hollywood sci-fi movie actually gave scripts to people that they can read first before signing on. And Gary Oldman was a fan, so he was like, "Yep, absolutely, I want to be Smith."
And it's pretty important to note too. This is like I think maybe we've talked about this in previous episodes. If we maybe it's come up before, but I think when we talk about Fifth Element, there's kind of different levels of Gary Oldman's career. And this is before you get into I don't want to say respected Gary Oldman, but he's obviously calmed down as an actor a little bit. He's not trying to be as over the top and crazy in all of his roles. He's kind of leaned more into playing normal people. Let's put it that way. But Lost in Space is really following a string of wild over the top performances, in things like Bram Stoker's Dracula and True Romance and Stansfield and Leon the Professional, and of course Zorg in Fifth Element, and even the bad guy in Air Force One, which is a pretty over the top Russian baddie. So it makes sense when you're looking for a Dr. Smith. I'm sure that was kind of the thinking of who is one of our most over the top actors to kind of get the same spirit that Jonathan Harris brought to this role. And Gary Oldman obviously was would slot right into that at this time.
Yeah. And then you add another Hollywood great, maybe not he's done some bad great. Yeah, maybe not real life great, but cinematically William Hurt was, one of the better actors of our time. And just seems like kind of a shitty person in real life, but the art is the art, and he's to get a name like William Hurt at this point in his career is very, very impressive. Very impressive. And again, I want to keep saying that these actors signed on because of the script. They're into it. And it wasn't just kind of... It doesn't feel like work for hire getting these guys. Am I wrong saying that?
Well, I'll talk about that in the review, about which ones I think some of them seemed more into it than others.
Sure.
With William Hurt, it is kind of tough to figure out because he has a very interesting career. You know, he kind of burst onto the scene in a sci-fi movie, Altered States, and right away he got, great reviews for that. And then you said he went into like a string of like very prestigious stuff, and he actually, one of the things he's like most known for is he was nominated for Best Actor 3 years in a row for Kiss the Spider-Woman, Children of the Lesser God, and Broadcast News in the 80s. And then, he just continues to, do these like really, really prestigious roles. At this point in 98, I think it was kind of surprising to see him in something like Lost in Space.
Right.
To jump into like a sci-fi, franchise starter. Later in life, when you could say, I think it's safe to say his career had slowed down a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's more surprising to see him willing to take, a leap into something like the MCU. And play Thunderbolt Ross, because I think actors of a certain age are just looking for work, they'll take what's offered for them, and they try to find whatever about that can speak to them. I would say that was a pretty big get for Lost in Space, also not just because of his talent, but because an actor like him joining on makes the project maybe look more prestigious on face value than it really is.
Totally.
Yeah.
And especially the 1-2 punch of him and Gary Oldman.
Right. Yeah.
Like those on the poster is pretty substantial. And then you have like a mega TV star. Yeah, absolutely. Next, Maureen Robinson, played by Mimi Rogers. I don't know a lot of Mimi Rogers' filmography. She is like the cameo in Austin Powers 1 to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Mimi Rogers is one of those actresses who I feel like never became what she was expected to be.
Totally.
And that's kind of shitty to say, but it is true. I think today she's most known for being briefly married to Tom Cruise and actually being the one who introduced him to Scientology. That's a nice little bit of trivia about her. But she definitely had a lot of like kind of well-received, critically acclaimed roles early in her career, including the movie The Rapture, which I know she was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award for Best Lead. But yeah, then you kind of start going through the filmography, and it just seems like, I don't know if it was the Tom Cruise thing or like what, but she eventually kind of settled into just always smaller supporting roles. And I know she did commit the ultimate sin of an actress in that she aged past 40, which you're not supposed to do. Yeah. But yeah, it just seems like I like her. I feel like she's I'm always pleased to see her and stuff. She's really, I don't know if you've seen Ginger Snaps. She's
I have
really
seen Ginger Snaps. Yeah, she's in that. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the mom, and she's great in that. And she is fun as Miss Kensington. But I don't know. I just think she's one of those actresses everyone knows, but yet has never been a big deal.
And again, that's not disrespectful. Like,
no.
I mean, it's truly a respectful way to say it. Is like, we are fans of Mimi Rogers. It's almost like she never got the star that she was deserved of. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, going down to the three kids, top to bottom. Oldest, Heather Graham, Judy Robinson. Heather Graham is a Trev and Chris staple. I don't know. Or somebody we would. She's great. she's great. Again, another Austin Powers alum, which is kind of funny. But yeah, Heather Graham at this point in the 90s is firing on all cylinders, especially coming off of Boogie Nights.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. She's coming right off of what is still probably her most like iconic role.
Yes. There's a little bit of a case to be made that this movie also maybe stalled her career. Mm-hmm. If there was two casualties from this, it was Matt LeBlanc and Heather Graham. Obviously, Heather Graham does go on to make The Spy Who Shagged Me like the next year.
And Bowfinger.
And Bowfinger. But again, another actress that deserves more. Like she's highly talented, but she... So you said the thing about Mimi Rogers. She gets typecast because she aged, right?
Yeah.
Heather Graham gets typecast because she's hot. And
yeah,
and I think that colors it a little bit, no?
I have some other thoughts about Heather Graham, but I'll save them for the review portion. Okay. Because I'm not entirely not with you on that, but I have an alternate take on it.
Okay. Next, Penny Robinson, played by Lacey Chabert. Now, the most famous Hallmark Christmas movie person in the world. Made about probably 100 of those movies at this point. Mm-hmm. She lines up with my age So when I was 10, I think she was like 16. So she was like new hotness, you know? Like she was like a person when I was young Chris where things were changing. And I was like, oh, Lacey Chabert, she might be one of my new crushes. So definitely.
I have to admit, my entire like knowledge of Lacey Chabert pretty much begins and ends with Mean Girls.
Yeah.
Because I was not a Party of Five fan, and this Party of Five was at the same time, right? So they're casting her because she's from Party of Five for this, right?
Correct.
Not a show I ever watched or was into. I'm sure my mom is probably a big fan of her because my mom watches all Hallmark Christmas movies. Not my genre, so really Mean Girls is what I know Lacey Chabert from.
Yeah, yeah. And she was also my favorite in that one. I was always like, oh my god, Lacey Chabert, hello. Will Robinson, played by Jack Johnson. This guy didn't really do anything. I don't want to sound so bad.
When I watched this movie and started looking at the cast, I bet you I did what everybody who watches this movie does today and went, did that kid grow up to be the Jack Johnson or just like the singer-songwriter? Is that Jack Johnson? Like, no, it's not. It's not that Jack Johnson.
No.
But I bet you that's a common misconception.
Yeah, yeah. And then just last but not least, we're not going to spoil who this person plays, but I just want to say that Jared Harris is in this movie. And a film...
Favorite of mine.
Yes, a favorite of yours. Film people know Jared Harris. A great actor. Was most recently in Chernobyl. Bunch of other stuff. He shows up...
Hollywood royalty. His dad is Richard Harris.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about the movie. Can we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All fossil fuels are virtually exhausted. The ozone layer is down to 40%.
Every school child knows that our recycling technologies will cure the environment.
Every school child has been lied to. In 2 decades, the Earth will be unable to support human life.
The future of mankind
There's a lot of space out there to get lost in.
is about to be placed in the hands of a brilliant scientist.
You're off saving humanity. We can't compete.
My only condition for accepting this mission was that we could bring the children with us.
T-minus 1 minute and counting.
His family,
This is Jupiter 1. The Robinsons are all tucked in. We are ready to fly.
and one man
Never fear.
Smith is here.
on his own mission.
Destroy all systems.
Farewell, my platinum-plated pal.
Destroy Robinson family.
Marine the children!
What was the price tag you put on our future?
We show you in the sun's gravitational pull.
The hyperdrive.
It could be thrown anywhere in the galaxy.
Anywhere but here.
Initiate!
We're lost, aren't we?
Now, of the millions of planets in the universe,
That's not one of ours.
the only one they're searching for
That's not even human.
is the one called home.
Nothing good will come of this. You being the expert on space exploration.
No, trust me, Major.
Evil knows evil.
I'm detecting motion.
My family is on this ship and you will follow my orders.
You finished hosing down the decks with testosterone. I may have found a way to get us off this planet.
I'm thinking this is your basic kiss for luck occasion.
Thinking. It's not really your strong suit, is it?
Ouch.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
Cool.
I'm coming back, Will. I promise.
Take care of my dad, okay, robot?
Affirmative.
Dad! Will! This mission sucks. Can we cut back on her oxygen so she's not quite so annoying when she wakes up?
Okay, that's it. I'm gonna turn this spaceship right around.
Lost in space.
I loathe children.
The year is 2058. Most of Earth's natural resources are virtually exhausted and can no longer support human life. The government begins construction of 2 hypergates that will allow the human race to travel across space to the distant planet Alpha Prime. Scientist Professor John Robinson heads the vital space mission along with his family: wife Maureen Robinson, oldest daughter Medical Officer Judy, teenage daughter Technician Penny, and their youngest son, gifted robotics expert Will, and joined by heroic military fighter pilot Major Don West. But the traitorous Dr. Zachary Smith, working for terrorists known as the Global Sedition, sabotages the mission and sends the space shuttle Jupiter 2 off course into the unknown of space.
You might say they are lost in space.
some may say.
Chris, I'm going to go first on this one.
Yes, please
So
do.
for me, this was a first-time watch, and we have not talked about how we felt, and I don't know what you're expecting to hear from me. But let me just say, I was trying to think about why didn't I see this at the time? Because 1998 was in that kind of wheelhouse where I was seeing a lot of big blockbusters. I would think almost all of them. And then I did remember that. So first of all, I do remember kind of having a visceral reaction to the trailer, being like, "Oh, they're doing like the dark and gritty thing, like whatever." But I don't really believe that would have stopped me. And then I do recall that you mentioned earlier, some might say this was like critically like panned. No. It was critically reviled. Like when it came out, I remember the vitriol against it was so immediate. And I think back then I really took that to heart. It was just like, it was one of those movies, it had that Wild Wild West kind of stink on it, right? It came out, everyone's like, this is terrible. You didn't hear a good word about it. So that was enough for me to really avoid it. But what's happened, it's interesting, like in recent years, and even just in the last couple of years, you and I have been revisiting like a lot of 90s movies. And I've found that I really respond well to this like 90s aesthetic, like I'm very nostalgic for like 90s kind of movies. I think there's just something about like the 90s vibe that is like so refreshing to the kind of blockbusters we're getting today. And it's also true that going back, I see all these movies that were like really, really panned at the time. And then I go and I visit them and I'm like, well, I think people were like overly harsh about this. Like, I don't understand why people are so like set on like demolishing this movie. It's actually kind of fun. Maybe it's just a disconnect from that time to now. Maybe it's because I'm comparing it to things now. It seems a little bit better. But I've really enjoyed a lot of like kind of critically panned movies from the 90s, and I like them, viewing them in a prism today. None of that's the case with this one. This is a flaming bag of alien shit. I'm sorry, Chris. I hate to do this to you and your beloved property, but this is a really bad movie. I struggled with this one. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I have a prediction that you were going to come. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe you're going to come at me a little bit and try to defend some of this, as maybe you have like a more nostalgic view of it, and I could even understand that with like your attachment to the source material. But I think for me, what's going to be interesting to talk about this movie is I think a lot of what I hate about it is very indicative of the time. I think this movie is a very interesting time capsule of a very misguided sort of movie that I think was very prevalent at the time. And that's what I'm interested to talk about. But yeah, I think almost everyone in this is like bad. Like I don't like, we don't like to shit talk actors, but Matt LeBlanc is really horrible in this. I don't like to shit talk actors, but William Hurt looks miserable in this. I don't like to shit talk actors, but Lacey Chabert is intolerable in this. I don't like to shit talk actors, but Heather Graham is like super, super stiff in this. The special effects don't hold up. I know that's like kind of unfair given the time. It's too long. It gets very, very boring in the middle. It's not good. It's not good. So I'm sorry if I hope I'm not breaking your heart, but I am interested to hear like what your take on it was. First of all, I'd like to hear what you thought of it then and what you think of it now, of course.
Well, first and foremost, I already knew what you were going to be like, okay? I've known you for way too long. So I was ready for this. So let me just drop this right here.
I need you to help us now, robot. Because we're friends.
Logic error. Friendship does not compute.
Just forget logic. Act with your heart.
Robot has no heart. Robot is powered by a fusion pulse generator.
Every living thing has a heart.
My programming has been modified to remove all emotion. Any attempts to override command protocols may result in fusing my neural net.
So listeners, what you just heard was I actually secretly recorded Trev one time, and I was a very young boy because he's so much older than me, and I was talking to him he's talking to me back in his robot voice, and I asked him could just be my friend and just have some fucking fun, and does he have a heart? And you know what? He responded that he doesn't have a heart because that's not how he's programmed. So yes, I was ready for you, and I love that we're so on the opposite spectrum here. And I am gonna defend it, and I'm gonna tell you why you are a sorry, sad little robot in your old age here, and why you should have seen this maybe at the time, but just regardless, let me tell you why. So my feelings when I saw it originally, well, I was 10 years old. So take that with a grain of salt. But I enjoyed it because I was experiencing a movie with my dad that he enjoyed a lot. We're going to not spoil the ending here, but the ending definitely goes off the rails. Okay, let's get that off the...
What?
Okay, no. But a lot of people haven't seen this movie, as we said by the the box office there. I also checked Letterboxd how many people have seen this movie, and there's like 900 reviews for it. That site's been around for a while. Anyways, at the time I was a kid, enjoyed it for what it was, and I've seen it many, many times in between. Like I said, I own it. I've owned it on DVD. I have not upgraded to Blu-ray, just to let you know. I had the toys. I used to burn the techno theme song onto many Chris mixes, as I used to call them.
That theme song.
And this movie is a goddamn blast. And I think it's just an entertaining, never boring, fun family adventure. The pacing cooks, the banter works.
What?
The characters are... Shit! Hey, this is my turn to speak. The characters are sincere. It gives just enough fan service without being distracting, which is, I think, a huge problem in modern filmmaking. And with their ham-fisted ways of doing things, this one handles it in a nice little way for the fans. I think they're nailing the family in such a short amount of time. Again, with the benefit of knowing the show, within 15 minutes, you know that the dad lets his work get into the way of his family. The mom is the supportive mediator. Penny is the rebel. Will is the boy genius. Judy is the girl who wants to take after her dad. A little rougher around the edges. Like, these are just character archetypes. Being from a close family of 5, I totally believe that their little banter in between each other. I felt that they were a family. They have camaraderie between them. There's genuine connections, in my opinion. I just think, the visual effects are punching above their weight class. They were back then too, but I think there's a charm to this. Kind of what you were getting about 90s filmmaking is, I think they're on real sets. There's a big robot that they're piloting, which is cool. When things go CGI, yeah, it's not great. It's actively bad a lot of the time. But you know what? It's bold. They're trying, and there's a lot of miniature work, which looks awesome. I think in the small, like in the character arcs, they are kind of nailing it. I don't know. I like being with these characters. I like Don West's, Han Solo-esque thing going on. He's not Han Solo, let me say, but I think Matt LeBlanc's his cockiness, his flirtatiousness works here. He's kind of dickish, but whatever. Who cares? Some people are dicks, but they're fun. I don't know. I don't know. I just think this movie is just really... I just had a blast revisiting it again. I really did. And I wasn't drunk and I wasn't high. I was watching it for real and I had a great time. I really did. I don't know. You know what this is? This is comfort food. This is absolute comfort food. It's not winning any awards. It's not some masterclass of filmmaking, but it is comfort food to a simpler time in my life that I look fondly back on.
I'm trying to figure out if I'm being punked right now, because in previous debates we've had like this, with something like Wild Wild West or Van Helsing, which I also think are horrible and you enjoy them, but on those I can kind of get it, where I'm like, well, Van Helsing, it's I don't know, it's pretty bad, but I see what Chris sees, as if he's as an idiot, I understand what you're what's appealing to. With Wild Wild West, I kind of there's it's just so bizarre that it's kind of looking at a car wreck where you can't look away. So maybe it's entertaining on that level. I'm kind of genuinely shocked, and what I really want to ask you is, but you kind of got to it at your end, and that's what surprises me. If you had said Trev, I know this is a bad movie, but I like it because I saw it when I was 10 and because it's based on a show I loved. But here you're telling me you think it's good, and I
genuinely
surprised. That is it's so not. It's so much was just
You son of a bitch.
So much of this movie is just so dead on arrival, and it's like I watch it and I just completely understand the reaction of the time. I understand why this killed some careers. I think they was probably deserved to a certain degree. There's just so much wrong with this movie.
But just hold, it's not like it's a likable, simple family
but it's
film.
Not likable. This family's not even likable. So
I disagree with that. I think again, I mean I don't want to bring more of my anecdotes into this, but it's like coming from just like a close family of 5 that bitches at each other and you know needles at each other and has a younger siblings like
Mom, don't.
What?
Vogue says this will be the style in 10 years. Can we cut back on her oxygen so she's not quite so annoying when she wakes up? Does he have to wake up at all?
Okay, that's it. I'm gonna turn the spaceship right around.
the scenes where Penny is like live streaming and like and then Will is making fun of her for being, you know, a dumb girl and being silly, or like when she's like drooling over Dawn and he's like, you know, breathe, Penny, breathe.
Could he be cuter? I don't think so. Breathe, Penny, breathe.
Like it just felt like I chuckled at that stuff. I was like, man, like this is me and my family. Like not to the extent obviously, but like I just feel like there's a sense of family and heart that is there. I bought it. I really do. I buy them as a family.
It's also surface level and like
and that's fair. I agree with that.
Like when we talk about the parents, like Maureen, right? What just a nothing role. Like Mimi Rogers is given nothing to do in this movie. She's mom. She's Mom Robinson. And that's it, right? William Hurt looks, like I said, he seems like he's miserable to be here. Like I don't know if this is the kind of case where he got like talked into this or what, but he's not committing to this. Like he just, to me, it's like such a flat performance. And like when you say like you feel like the arcs are there, like that arc is like totally indicative of this. What I mean, and when it's obviously we said we're going to talk about Akiva Goldsman. Yeah. And I think he has strengths and weaknesses. Like my thing with Akiva Goldsman is I think he's just like he's hard to peg because he's such a mixed bag to me. Yeah. He's written movies I genuinely enjoy. He's written movies I think are awful. He's doing a great job, you know, show running Star Trek Strange New Worlds. He is like he was involved in Constantine. I love that movie, and I remember he was on the audio commentary for that, and I remember him being like very entertaining on that audio commentary. He wrote I, Robot, which I actually kind of like, you know. Mm-hmm. I think Batman Forever and Batman and Robin are like underrated for what they are. So but then like, you know, he also, I think he got like an Oscar for writing A Beautiful Mind, which I think is like trite garbage, you know. And right. And he's like so up and down for me, and I think he has a real weakness in this movie of making these characters feel real and human. Like, so like, if I can just defend that, because he's going to like such old cliches. Mm-hmm. It's like the character arc of John Robinson. Is it John? Right? I'm already okay.
You're forgetting the most common name of all time, other than my name.
This entire movie is like very forgettable. And when John Robinson like tells Will at the beginning, like, you know, because like the whole thing is he's so obsessed with his work, he's never there for his son. Yeah. He misses all his science fairs and everything. And that's the arc, right? And there's even a moment early in the film where he's like, someday, son, I'll prove to you that I love you. It's like, well, you could just say it. You could just say it right now. Like, you don't have to like make this like a mission to do that. It's like, that's what I mean. It's like, that's like such like sloppy nonsense to me.
Some dads do need that. Some dads literally do need to go lost in space and time travel and figure things out. Okay.
It's just so, and then like Heather Graham's character is just like that. I think that's also a very thankless role, and I'll talk about her performance later, but I think it's just, there's nothing there with her either, other than like, she's, I guess, the technical one. The movie on like a base level doesn't answer a lot of necessary questions. Like, what's the deal with the global sedition? Like, why do they sabotage this project? Why wouldn't they want, I mean, they live on Earth too. Like, why would they want this mission to fail? That's never explained. We get no like backstory on them. Why would you send a family on this mission? That makes no sense. Like, there's this whole thing where, you know, this is a mission where if it works, they're going to be off by themselves for years. That's a really shitty thing to take your family on, because there's even dialogue about how, you know, these kids are going to grow up and they're never going to have like a boyfriend or girlfriend because they're just with their family.
Well,
like,
first and foremost, like that is the premise of the show, number one. But two, that's what I liked about Penny live streaming, or even the little conversation with him and with her and and Will in the beginning before they leave.
On this eve, before she is torn from everything she knows, kidnapped, hurled into deep space against her will. What thoughts fill the mind of the daring space captive?
Will there be boys enough for Prime? What will I wear?
This is showing that this decision is actually going to affect their lives. It's not going to be easy. Like, it is going to affect them.
For the last 3 years, I've missed everything. Training, so I can spend the next 10 years missing everything else. I'm not staying home for dinner. I'm going out to see my friends.
Penny.
I'm going out to say goodbye to my entire life.
And the only reason that the Robinson family, or John Robinson, is doing this is because he goes, well, he's the guy that's gonna make this happen. He's the one in charge, and he's agreed to only do it if he can bring his family along. So it's like they have to go together to be, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of.
But he could also say, hey, I only agree if I take my family along. Let me also take 8 other scientists.
I know, but that's
3 technicians.
It's the premise of the show. Okay.
I get it, but like when you're doing the movie and you were trying to here's the thing, Chris, and this is why I want to talk about the tone of this movie.
Right.
So this is where we get into a very important conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you who this movie was made for, because it doesn't seem like it understands and wants to commit to being a family movie or a more serious sci-fi movie. So when you say that's the show, I agree. The thing is, we just talked about how the show had a very childlike, innocent, campy quality. This movie most of the time does not. So these story problems stick out more. If you're going to try and make your Lost in Space movie the more serious version, then you actually do have to consider those questions. You can't get away with being like, it's so dumb because it's fun.
No, and honestly, I agree with you. Remember, I did not call this a masterclass of filmmaking, okay? I say I just find this very entertaining, and I just dig it, okay? Number one. But the thing is that this movie's overstuffed. Big time. Big time.
It's way too long.
It's way
too
long.
Can I just quickly tell you a true story?
Sure.
I watched this movie with my girlfriend. Lately, okay. She's been like, hey, can I watch some of these other franchise movies with you? I'm like, your funeral? So we started watching this movie, and I don't know, we were about like 40 or 50 minutes in, and we just both had these like glazed looks on our face. And I'm like,
oh, the first hour is the best.
And I say to her, are you hanging in there? And she goes, well, I just keep telling myself it must be over soon, right? And I said to her, this movie is 2 hours and 10 minutes. And her response was, I'm out. She got up and she kind of walked away. She kind of came back for the end, but I don't blame her. Like, if I wasn't like locked into this, I don't know if I would have made it through, because it's, you say the first 50 minutes is the best. What do you, is that because
it's the family stuff? Like, this is where I think the nostalgia boner for the show is showing through on my end, is that they are nailing these characters. They are nailing the dynamic. This is the show. So if it is if it is a little bit too cookie cutter and a little surface level, well, sometimes that's okay. And especially if you are doing a romp in space, based on a 60s TV show where things are silly and dumb and campy. Now, where you're saying that they got to choose a tone or pick a lane, I agree with you. Yeah. It does go back.
Because I wish this was a romp, but I think it's too dour.
Well, hold on though. It's hard when you're. I get you. Now you got to put your business hat on, right? Like, you got to put your business hat on and be like, okay, we're gonna do as much as we can with the camp and the banter and the one-liners, and we still got the robot. It still has the goofy voice. I mean, we're not even at the spider ending here, but like, even the sets, like, it's got that charm factor of like old school filmmaking. It feels, even in their bodysuits, it feels that camp level there. The bad special effects help it as well, maybe unintentionally, but. Remember when we mentioned about the marketing, saying that it was going to be like this edgy, cool, like badass movie, where I think that I don't think that sold the movie correctly. I don't think it's exactly that, because this movie isn't just a dour slog in not in the sense of your enjoyment, but I would say it still has a playful sense of humor. The score is playful. It feels like kind of an energetic camp element instead of like a bombastic Hans Zimmer. You know what I mean? Like, it's less. I think this movie's less serious than people are giving it credit for. And even in the reviews when it first came out, I watched the Ebert and Siskel review, and they hated it. Fair enough. And everybody hated it back then.
Good men.
Yeah, good men. Okay, all right. Dine in hell. Okay. But they bitched about it. Everybody bitched about it stateside. The UK audience was a lot less harsh on it at the time. The US was mad about it, but the UK audience was. So that European crowd was less harsh on it. And in years later, I know this is your first time, but people looking back on the movie or revisiting it, as I have, and especially when it's up against the 2018 Netflix series, which we'll talk about, there's been a fondness that has come for it, being like, this is a lot campier and goofier than we gave it credit for. And so I agree with you to a point that it doesn't pick a lane, but I still think that this movie's trying to have some fun.
No, I don't.
Have fun.
I don't disagree, but my point is like
pot over. You don't disagree.
my point is it never commits to that long enough,
and you're right.
Because it does keep falling back into like the dour, dark stuff. I mean, when they go into that time bubble, there's something really dark subject matter and thematics in there. In terms of finding your family dead in the future and everything. And I know you're probably just jerking off because it's time travel, but like you're losing the movie's not fun anymore at that point. And I think that's a big problem this movie's having. And Chris, I just want to go back to something you said. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And I want to counterpoint something, because you said you have to put on your business hat, right? Mm-hmm. Well, let's put on our business hat and let's consider the fact that this movie opened to horrible reviews and bad box office, which kind of indicates that their business decisions were wrong.
Yeah.
I think if they had made a more fun, colorful movie, this might have done better and we might have gotten sequels. You can, and I'm going to use like a crazy analogy, but it's the difference between the early Marvel films, which struck a very fun, light tone, with some serious thematics, but the characters are always joking. And then, a movie like Batman versus Superman, which has its fans, but also didn't do as well as they hoped. And it was kind of more critically, divisive. And I think you could look at this with Lost in Space. They decided to go the BVS route of trying to make like a darker version. I think if they had just leaned into more of the spirit of the 60s movie, they might have actually had something. I think they really miscalculated on this with a lot of the decisions to go as dark as they do as often as it does.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because even like the Will... Dr. Smith and robot trio angle is kind of sidelined. You can definitely tell. You can tell there's a lot of stuff that's like hoping on the franchise. Like that's what I mean when there's like this movie's overstuffed. That's what this one really does feel like. Like we'll get to that later. We'll talk about the global sedition later. We'll get the trio of the characters you love later.
Is there anything to say about them? Like, oh, I see what you're saying.
No, that's what I mean. Not us. Yeah, there's nothing to say. But the filmmakers.
Yeah.
And I think it does fall into the stuff we do make fun of on this show. It's probably not the best decision making, and you're right. It did fail for multiple reasons, and their decision was lacking. But you can't blame them, really, in the middle to late 90s when especially American audiences wanted something sexy and cool and dark and bombastic. Like look at like The Matrix is coming out. Blade is out. Just.
I remember watching good movies. Yeah,
but I know you know what I mean. But what I'm saying is that there is to go back to your question of who is this made for. They were trying to have their cake and eat it too. Yeah. It obviously blew up in their face. But I would say, like, okay, my dad's reaction. My dad was a fan from the start, right? From the start, as it aired, didn't watch it with nostalgia glasses, right? He liked the movie up until the dark and crazy ending. That's what I would say. I think he liked a lot of the stuff that was going on, but I remember talking about it at the end of it. He was like, "What was that about?" Like it does get really heady, especially with, like you said, seeing a family tombstones, from in the future, and we'll get to the Dr. Smith stuff, and it just it is misplaced. But I just like this family, and I know you don't like them on the level that I do. Yes, they're caricatures, but it's working for what the show was. And I don't know, I hope people will look back on this and maybe revisit it in the future, and we'll say, it was a little bit more campy than they gave it credit. I don't know. I thought I chuckled quite a bit. I thought it was a good sense of humor. I liked Don's one-liners. I liked his continual failings of hitting on Judy. I liked Gary Oldman, especially when he's like he's got this great worrisome pessimistic Smith like the TV show, but he's still got that level of evil that Gary Oldman can show. You know,
Someone should go after them. Unlock.
Well, I forbid it. You're a boy. A clever one, certainly, but a child nonetheless. This planet is likely full of predators.
And even if you found them, what if they hurt? Ravaged? Dying? What good could you do?
You can help them. You're a doctor.
Yes. Yes. I'm a doctor.
I like that.
Gary Oldman's interesting to me because he's clearly giving the best performance in the movie. Like, that's not even a question. Like, Gary Oldman's the best part of this film. But it's also, like, not one of Gary Oldman's best performances or, like, his most iconic, right? Do you agree that he's not over the top enough? Like, I think that's my problem.
Yes,
like,
I
on
agree.
a Gary Oldman scale, right? If we, on a scale of 1 to 10, and if 1 is, like, Commissioner Gordon, 10 is Zorg, right? I guess we can say, like, 8 is Stansfield, you know? He's pitching Smith at, like, a 5 or a 6, and I wish he was at that 8. I wish he was, like, doing a Stansfield kind of performance here. Because when he does let it out, when he gets like campy, the movie always perks up. And I definitely went into it thinking like, Gary Oldman's going to be the highlight, and he is, but not as much as I was hoping.
That's fair.
Let's talk about Leblanc,
Okay.
because you said, and it's pretty much documented fact that this movie ends his film career as a leading man. Right? He kind of just does not even try to go back to it. I get it. He's bad in this. Like, it's one of those performances where you are seeing someone outside of their comfort zone trying very hard to act. Now, I have heard it said from others, and I kind of agree with it now, that the ironic thing about this movie, or kind of the funny thing in retrospect, is this feels like the kind of movie that Joey Tribbiani, the actor, would make. Right, or that because like if you look at this as this is Joey
which is
Tribbiani,
the easiest joke to make about this movie,
but it's so true, and like it's like it's not only the kind of movie that Joey Tribbiani would act in, but it feels like Joey Tribbiani wrote this movie. Like it's if you watch it going like that's Joey Tribbiani doing this performance, then you can almost start to enjoy it because it's like a very bad generic hot shot.
Okay, last one to kill a bad guy buys the beer.
Action star performance.
$1 million worth of weaponry. I've traded all back for a lousy can of rain.
And it's like I almost feel bad for Matt LeBlanc watching this because I do think what happened with the Friends cast is I think a lot of them, like I said, there was this like push to like find what's their movie lane. Right, and some of them handled that very well, and some of them could stretch, a little bit more. I think Matthew Perry was smart to say like, you know what, I'm just Chandler. I'll always be Chandler. And I think with Matt LeBlanc, someone said, well, we got to put you into a different kind of movie. We got to try and find a different audience. And it didn't work. Like I see him on screen struggling with this performance. If this had like a more dynamic, funny, likable Don West, it would definitely help. But I don't know. I guess you don't agree, but I think he's really bad.
Yeah, that's honestly that does surprise me. I thought maybe you'd have a little bit more of a softer speech on the guy for this one. Out of everything, I knew you were gonna hate it. I knew that beyond obviously, but I was like, maybe he's gonna see something in LeBlanc that I'm seeing. But I mean, I don't know. I think learning more about the making of the movie too, kind of makes me feel a little bit easier on him, in the sense of how it was filmed. Can we talk a little bit about that? That it was like extremely rushed and grossly underfunded, and because he was working on Friends at the time, they had to plan like around his schedule, and then they filmed a bunch of scenes on green screen, like with or without William Hurt.
My family is on this ship, and you will follow my orders. Whether you agree with them or not, is that clear, Major? Hey, save your speeches. I like you.
But I'm going to do whatever I think it takes to ensure the success of this mission, with or without your help. Is that clear, Professor?
I mean, that's hard on anyone, and especially a guy trying to stretch his legs, I think. But I still think in his sly flirtatiousness and his comedic timing, I think that is what works for me. I don't know. I liked his banter. Maybe not when he's like the hero role. You know, the everyman. And the Chris Pratt, as you like to call it. You know, the Chris Pratt everyman. What do you call him? What do you call Chris Pratt? Chris Pratt?
Shitty?
Come on, Mario looks good.
Yeah, whatever.
No, but I think just generic action man. That's what you call him. Generic action man. And when he's playing that, yes, it's kind of a little not the best, but I don't know. I like his little one-liners. I thought it was fun. I like the cookie cutter performance of the movie. There's so much going on that it's just nice to have. It's nice to have old friends. You know, I wish I could fight you more on that one, but I mean,
like I wish it was Matthew Perry, because it would be like so
bad.
Yeah, it would be like so out of place that it would become like that would become camp, you know.
Right.
But that's the thing is like there's like I kind of wish Matt LeBlanc was trying to play this a little bit more like Joey, but then he's
just Joey. And I think this is my thing.
But it would be better for the movie.
But Trev, what I think this is the problem. The problem is that he is so mega iconic. Okay, that's a big part of it. And no matter how much we can try to disassociate Joey Tribbiani from this movie, it's very difficult. You look at the guy, he looks like him in his prime. He acts like him a little bit. He in that show, he plays an actor that takes roles like this, like you said. Mm-hmm. I think it's very hard to divorce that. I think it doesn't sit as well because yes, you're so aware that you're watching Joey Tribbiani.
I just think some actors can stretch and do a lot of things more than others can, and it doesn't even bother me. Like I've had this conversation before, you know, like people are so quick to shit on actors, which we don't like to do.
No, never. People
are so quick to shit on actors who only have like one thing they do well. And it doesn't really bother me. Like, I think, you know, like I've always used, and I know I'm going to say this and someone's going to come at me and be like, well, he did so much more. But I mean, in general, like you look at actors like Humphrey Bogart and John Wayne, and they kind of had one thing, but they did it really, really well. Mm-hmm. Or like Peter Lorre, who I love, you know, like he was always like that sniveling Peter Lorre guy. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think Matt LeBlanc is very good at playing Joey or Joey type characters.
Yeah.
And I think after this, he might have even realized, okay, I took a shot at that. I bet you he was like, I don't know if I didn't do very well. And I'm sure he probably, and I feel bad saying this, but I bet you he took the Fairness movie to heart a little bit, probably blamed himself a little bit and said, I'm not going to do that anymore. And you see him like walk away from movies. Like it's not even like he's, you know, he stops being a movie star. He's like, I'm not going to take that swing again.
Right.
And just certain performers are better at, it's probably also a matter of finding the right way to stretch, because you just said the thing about how he was so iconic at this time and it's hard to see Joey, but you know the one in Friends who did that much better is you look at like Courtney Cox going off and playing Gale Weathers in Scream, and that's like, you know, she was on Friends, here was her playing a completely different kind of character, but you never think of Monica when you watch Scream.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
And that's like, and I get that Monica's not as not as easily defined of a character as Joey, but even still, like that's a stretch that worked. She pulled it off.
Well, actually, you kind of nailed it by. Now I'm slightly agreeing with you because you're right. The Joey character is so, like he's so that. You know, he's such a dum-dum. Like he's such a dum-dum. Where I think there's a lot more depth in Monica's character that allows Courtney Cox to stretch. And I mean, it shows even in the show. I mean, this isn't Friends cast, but you know, when the show
we should have done Friends cast. But
we really, you know, we'd have
all these piece of shit movies.
We would have had a lot more fun.
Yeah, I know.
But even when they gave,
maybe we should pivot to Friends cast.
You know what? When I think of this, I think space good, ships good. Lacey Chabert, good. But like I think I like it. Okay, sorry, that's the last one. Okay, that's the last one. But what I mean is, like, I think that even when they gave Matt LeBlanc more room to play in that show, even the fandom turned against him.
Yeah. Or when they tried to make Joey more complex in his own show. And
Oh, fuck. That's like, he was always the side character. Like, out of all of that cast, as much as I love that show, and I love Joey as a character, and I really do have fond memories of Matt LeBlanc in that role, and I think it was a one-note role that he expertly did, which is what you're saying. And I think when you see him for that many years at the height of that fame to even stretch out a little bit, it's gonna sit weird, and it did even in the fucking show. So, yeah. Anyways, So I think I'm just repeating myself at this point. I apologize. I got caught up saying Friends lines. So,
well, the other performance I think is kind of actively bad is Heather Graham.
Right.
And I want to hit on this one because you mentioned earlier that you and I are both Heather Graham fans, and that's true. But I have a feeling I'm maybe a fan of her in like a different way than you are. Like, certainly a big part of it is just having a crush on her.
Yeah,
of course. You know, being of the age of like, she was always a big crush of mine growing up. Even when I first saw her in License to Drive as a little kid, you know, and just like falling in love with her. But I'm sure you're not unaware that there is a large contingent of people that think she's a very bad actress. That's been, you know, a reputation that's followed her for a long time. And I've always thought that's a little unfair. But I have, now I'm looking at her filmography and I'm thinking about how, she was pretty bad in this. And I think the key to Heather Graham is she has to play very kind of normal, just like sweet people. I think that's where she really excels. Mm-hmm. So when she's like just Lorraine, you know, the kind of character shows up at the end of Swingers, great, right? You know, just the simple, kind of really realistic high school girl in License to Drive, fine. Twin Peaks, you know, kind of not the most memorable character, but it's fine, right? When you ask her to like kind of really, again, if we ask her to like really stretch and play like the scientist, or the British prostitute in From Hell, you do start to get into some trouble areas, I think.
Right.
And so she, again, here I think she's just struggling. It's also like the character's kind of written to just only serve as like, I'm fixing the thing on the ship, or I'm rebuffing Don West. That's kind of like all she does.
Mission Control, this is Dr. Robinson. We are in the green.
Roger, Doctor. You are go to initiate cryostasis.
Oh, one question, Doctor.
You are at T-minus 50 seconds.
Is there room in these tubes for two?
There's barely enough for you and your ego, Major.
Hey, don't sweat it, Doc. I do this all the time.
Just drive carefully.
So again, it's like a little thankless, but I thought she was really stiff in this as well.
I
you know who honestly I think is the second best performance is Jack Johnson. Like he's great. Like he's fine. He's good. He's like that's a very good naturalistic kid performance.
I think he's immediately recognizable as like a precocious little genius.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest, the scene where he is like piloting a robot is super fun. When he's talking through it, and the Dick Tufeld voice is saying the stuff like he's like, you know, Mom says look away, or Mom says get out of here.
Get the hell out of there.
Mom says get the hell out of there.
And him piloting it, and even when like Robot quote unquote dies, he's like, you know, okay, goodbye Robot. Like he's just moving on because he's Science Boy.
It's
like,
really weird because that's another area where I feel like the movie, like the script is like missing something or whatever. Because like, so Robot is first introduced to us when Smith sabotages it, and Robot, you know, tries to take down the ship and kill the Robinsons, and then Will manages to take it back over, and then he is like piloting it for a chunk of the movie, and then it gets like damaged, and he's like, well, I have to save Robot. And he like puts his own brainwaves into it. But up until this point, like we haven't seen Robot have any personality of its own. So it's like bizarre that like Will cares enough to even try to do that. It's just like, you know what I mean? Like it's almost like, I agree with you. It's kind of fun to see him pilot it, but it's almost like he should be talking to it at that point, not just entirely controlling it. Because then it makes it seem odd later that Robot just has more of its own personality, especially since he says like, oh, it's damaged and I had to give it like some of my brainwaves or whatever. I don't know. We're getting this is like an Akiva Goldsman thing. We're really getting into Alfred putting his brainwaves into the computer in Batman and Robin here. Lacey Chabert, you know, if she like never opened her mouth and talked in this, I'd probably be a little better. Can you deal with this voice?
Yeah, I like her. I liked her when I was a kid, and then I grew up with her in Mean Girls, and then I've always had a little soft spot for her. And I know she was Meg for one season of Family Guy until she she wanted too much money, so Seth MacFarlane told her to go stick it. But Yeah, I don't know. I like her her anime type of voice. Like, I don't know. She's at least
Can you just do me a favor, Chris, and drop a little bit of it in right here?
This mission sucks.
And now, audience, I want you to understand. You have to deal with that for 2 hours and 10
Well,
minutes.
she doesn't talk for 2 hours and 10 minutes. People barely get through 90 minutes of us fuckheads talking. So, you know what? She's made a career out of her voice. So.
And now, Chris, the time has come.
Yes, the time has finally come. We just have to jump. We have to jump here.
It's not even. I don't even know if I'm jumping where you want to jump. We'll get there in a second.
Okay.
But I just want to say you're going to come to me in our podcast that we
on
started
the day
together,
of my daughter's. Okay.
And you're going to tell me that a movie is good that has Blarp in it.
Okay, hold on. Hold on.
You're going to defend Blarp?
No, I'm not going to defend Blarp. At all. Blarp is a badly CGI'd little monkey creature that camouflages itself, that it attaches to Penny Robinson and becomes her pet. In the show, I believe the pet was called Debbie or something. I can't remember what it was, a little alien creature. But in this one, it's Blarp. It was supposed to be an animatronic. The puppeteering really wasn't working. And it must have been fucking terrible because they went this option and it looks like MS Paint. Yeah. It was really bad in 1998. It is atrocious now. So there's no defending Blarp.
It's not even just the effect though. Like, obviously the effects are terrible, but like the general design of it is like
it's
not
bad.
appealing. It's not cute. Blarp feels like the ultimate studio add-on, right? Mm-hmm. We need a Blarp. Mm-hmm. We need Blarp toys. We need Blarp dolls. Like Blarp.
Big time.
Blarp, when he comes into the movie, it honestly feels like parody, doesn't it? Like feels like the joke that's always made in like skits about these kind of movies. Like, and then he just kind of sticks around. Blarp sucks.
Yeah, did you watch when I sent you the clip of the deleted scenes? Did you watch those?
Oh my god, giant Blarp is horrifying.
So again, and we've alluded to this a bunch, but they basically are on the planet that they're stranded on, and a big time bubble is encompassing the planet. And the Robinson family goes into the bubble, and they discover that Blarp is still on the planet. Half the family has died, and Blarp is now this 20-foot tall, big Jim Henson Muppet. Mm-hmm. And, honestly, campy. I would have liked it. Keep it in. That better than the fucking the 2D animation we watched for 2 hours, okay?
Well, I will say by removing it, that kind of like... there's like a big chunk in like the middle of the movie and even heading into the end where like the female characters just have nothing to do. Yeah. They just like vanish from the movie. It's like, let's let the men talk, for the rest of this movie. And that's because you realize they cut out the whole Blarp Penny subplot. But yeah, it's where like, I'm not the biggest Jar Jar defender in the world. I don't really like Jar Jar either, but I do.
First of all, do you ever think you'd ever say that sentence in your life?
Not until I saw this movie. The thing is like, this is the same year, right? And like, it's probably just because way less people saw this movie, but I do realize now that like all that vitriol of the past few decades that was thrown at Jar Jar, most of that should have been going towards Blarp, because Blarp is like everything people say about Jar Jar is actually true of Blarp.
Sure.
Maybe not the racist part, but like
exactly. Yeah, hold on. We're talking a little monkey creature versus
yeah, but like the awful, annoying, bad attempt at comedy, like that's where I think it's very comparable.
Also, to correct you in real time, Phantom Menace came out 1 year later, but fair enough.
This was 98. You're right. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yep. Okay. Finally, can we just jump to the end? We're running a little long, so let's jump to the end. Mm-hmm. And plus, we still got some stuff to talk about too. But we have to talk about like the spider in the room, and basically, again, we're in a time bubble at the end. And we, John Robinson and Don West go in, and they meet up with older Will Robinson, who has survived after like probably 20 years. The family's dead, and he's played by Jared Harris. Now, I just learned this, okay? And I was probably, I mean, it was obvious to you because you know, but... when I first watched this movie, I didn't know who the hell Jared Harris was. And all the rewatches that I've done in my youth, I don't know who Jared Harris is. Yes. I only know Jared Harris.
I know what you're about to say, and it was very bizarre to me as I watched it, yes.
And I've only known Jared Harris in the last, 7 years. Maybe. But Jared Harris's performance as Older Will is 100% dubbed. Poorly. and it is such a different accent and affectation. It doesn't match at all. And especially now that I can actually, dissect film a little better, or at least know the inner workings of things. And it was distracting for sure. It begs the question, why even hire Jared Harris? Just get a actor with a better American accent? But it was very, very poor.
This to me was like, when I found out something about this, is like one of the biggest miscalculations of the movie. Because you mentioned earlier that there's a lot of cameos from the original cast in this.
Correct.
But oddly enough, the two significant cast members who did not cameo are Jonathan Harris and Bill Mumy. Or Mummy, whatever.
Yeah, I'm Mumy, you're Mummy.
Yeah, sorry. Bill Mumy did not cameo. And apparently, the initial idea was Bill Mumy would play the older Will. Because he would be obviously age appropriate for it at this point. And from what I read, I'm guessing you probably saw the same thing, Stephen Hopkins decided that would be too distracting. Yeah. Too distracting to Bill Mumy. And I can only say, even as someone who's not a huge fan of the show like you are, I just think like that's insane. Like this clearly should have been Bill Mumy.
I know.
Like that makes so much sense and would have been so fun for like the fans of the show. And like it doesn't even need to be like, I'm not sure how great of an actor Bill Mumy grew up to be, but like
he's not a dubbed performance.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like that so should have been Bill Mumy. And like and then to cast Jared Harris and then just completely dub him over. It's like what. Like I guess, like you said, it goes to like the element of the movie being rushed.
Yeah.
Like maybe they thought he would have time to fix his accent, and then they're on set, and they're just like, oh no. But it's very distracting now because Jared Harris has gone on to be more recognizable, and so you can't deal with those scenes because you're like, huh? And honestly, the movie has a lot of bad ADR. I'm sure you noticed that as well. It does. The very first scene where you were introduced to Gary Oldman when he's like in that fake holographic desert. That's like entirely ADR'd as well. You can just tell his like dialogue's not exactly matching up to his lips. And I did read a lot of that was that they there were certain things they hadn't figured out yet when they were filming, and they like ADR'd it in later. Like the name of the ship they find in the future. Did you see this? Like the Prometheus or whatever.
Yeah,
when they filmed Proteus. Yeah, sorry. They didn't know it was called the Proteus, and they were always just saying ship. And so anytime the characters say Proteus, if you look, their lips do not match it because that was something they decided later and had them all ADR in. So yeah, definitely a rushed movie.
Yes, very rushed. And it's funny because Jared Harris is apparently on the record of disowning this film.
I can't imagine why.
Well,
I'm on the record of disowning this film. I'm going to say I never saw it.
I'm going to dub your voice into this film and make it my holiday project. But he found out basically at the premiere.
Oh, that's nice.
So he's like sitting there watching the movie and he's like, what the fuck? That's not me.
Isn't that what happened to the Flash Gordon guy? Why does this keep happening in all these movies we're watching?
That's true. We should make it a segment. Dubbing Dum-Dums with Trev and Chris. So anyways, Jared Harris, Older Will. Now there's one more thing we got to talk about. One more thing. Again, I said the spider in the room. This is the moment that I think is indefensible by fans, haters, everyone in between. Well, Older Will is alive, and maybe not well, but he's alive, and he's building his time machine. And you wonder, how has Will survived? Well, he's survived because earlier in the film, actually in the past, technically, 20 years earlier, when the Robinson family is attacked by man-eating spiders, an alien spider slashes Dr. Smith. And then what's revealed in the future is that bug bite or slash has now mutated Dr. Smith into what the credits deem Spider-Smith.
How nice to see me again after all these years. Confused, John. Have I changed? The spider's sting had some unexpected side effects.
Fully CGI creation, made in the MS Paint that was made with Blarp. Kind of a cool. Okay, I'll say this: it's kind of cool when maybe he comes out and he's clanking around and stuff. But the CGI is just not good. And also, why is this in this movie? That's maybe the biggest thing. It's just like it's a big. What the hell is going on in my fun space romp?
Would you watch a buddy cop movie with Spider-Smith and the Scorpion King? Because it's about it's very similar. Right?
You know what? You're right.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of, because it is terrible CGI, but also, yeah, like I don't see. I'm in the perspective of not knowing the show like you do, and even I, as somebody who didn't watch the show, when this happened in the movie, it was just mind-boggling to me. like what? So first of all, this is another area.
I wish. Let me say this. I wish I watched this with you. I really do. This would have been so fun. Because when I had talked earlier in the last episode, I was like, Trev, you've never seen Lost in Space, right? And you're like, no. And I was like, so you don't know anything? And you're like, nope. I was like, oh my god, Spider-Smith.
Yeah. So. Well, this is another area where you talk about how a lot of this was like feels like they were just waiting for like the next movie or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, this very much does feel like it's a pilot, right? But the problem is it's a 2-hour and 10-minute pilot. Because another big problem I think the script has is that we don't get the reveal of who the villain is in this movie until, like, the last 20 minutes. And then it's just, like, this weird Spider-Smith creature. And until that point, you're kind of like, is there no villain? Is the villain just these, like, random spiders that attack them? Like, and it seems like, is this going to be some weird kind of esoteric experimental film that has no real villain, right? It's just about them up against the elements. You know, is this The Martian? But it is Lost in Space, and then it's like, no, there's Spider-Smith. But he comes so late in the game that's bad on like a structural level. But then also he looks terrible, and it just seems like you said, it doesn't feel like in the spirit of anything that's happened before.
It creeps into that way too dark territory that you're talking about. That it's revealed that Dr. Smith ate and killed the family, all the girls. It's like, oh, I don't like that at all. Yeah. And also it shows that older Will is a dumbass. He was a boy genius until he went loop-de-loop, and he's like, oh, I didn't understand that my whole family was murdered.
Well, that's why because this the movie tries so hard for like 5 minutes before that to replicate that classic Smith Will relationship you talked about.
Yes.
But it's not like, it should have been going through the whole movie, right? And it's like before they get to the Spider-Smith sequence, you can tell they're like, oh shit, we forgot to have these two characters ever bond. So suddenly they go on like one little adventure together. It would have been way better, obviously, because, and I say this even as someone who hasn't seen the show, I can only imagine you agree, if Will was like always like the one kind of sticking up for Smith and saying like, I don't know, maybe he's okay, or like Smith was always kind of trying to trick Will into thinking he's good. Like that should have been a through line throughout the whole movie and not just in like the last half hour.
Yeah, I agree. That's the biggest failing in my opinion. I know there's many in your opinion, but that's my biggest one is leaving that trio of characters out of the shenanigans for as long as they do. But yeah, did you like at least? Okay, we're full on spoilers here. I mean, you mentioned it before by making a jab at me, but I do like my time travel. Okay, and you can stick it because I love my time travel, and I like that this movie has kind of like this ballsy way of killing the entire family in front of you and then retroactively using time travel to save them. I like it. That's classic sci-fi shit. And I dug it. You didn't like it?
Yeah, sure. Whatever.
Okay, whatever. You know what? Some people haven't watched thousands and thousands of hours of Star Trek, okay? And rewatched ad nauseum. Sometimes time travel still works for me.
It's exactly what I hope to see in my fun Lost in Space romp, was the entire family brutally die.
Yeah. Well, whatever. It leads to a pretty exhilarating ship flying through the planet core and slingshotting out the other side, and the score is going.
And then one of the most abrupt movie endings I've ever seen in my life.
Hey, you wanted the movie to end 40 minutes before, so you know what?
It's true.
You're welcome.
That was like a real monkey paw situation where I'm like, oh, why is this movie still going on? And then the movie's just like, end credits. And you're like, wait, what? Huh? Like it really felt like something was missing there.
Well, let's just go right now. They obviously plan on that sequel. Like you said, such an abrupt ending. Well, some details on the sequel was, well, more Blarp, just to let you know.
But they're all in on Blarp.
But basically, they go through another wormhole and finally do end up at Alpha Prime where the hypergates are. But because now they're in the future, it's already been populated by people, and then also the global sedition is still a threat. And now, also, you'd love this, but Judy cures Dr. Smith, obviously, because they don't want to do that again. And Penny ends up receiving the same chameleon camouflage ability as Blarp does.
Great.
Isn't that
really,
so? That's
really
stupid.
sad we missed out on all of this.
Well, we ended here with Lost in Space. That hasn't really stopped Hollywood from trying in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, let's just get this out of the way. Obviously, Trev doesn't want more. I would have liked to see this cast of characters do a thing again and have another shot at it. But we didn't. And flash forward to 2003, 2004, where The Robinsons Lost in Space is a TV pilot directed by John Woo.
Yeah.
Now, I just learned about this when doing the research.
Yeah, me too.
And, it was the Jupiter 2 was the ship was turned into a planet landing craft that would be deployed from a larger mothership. Smith is gone. Penny is a baby. And there's a new Robinson child named David. The cast includes Brad Johnson as John Robinson. First of all, that's hilarious. That's almost an anagram. Jane Brooks as Maureen. Ryan Malgarini as Will. Mike Irwin as Don West. And Trev, we got to name our girl.
I know.
She cannot catch a fucking break. But Adrienne Palicki was cast as Judy. Is there an actress that has been in more pilots in the modern era than Adrienne Palicki?
Failed pilots. We remember our initial spin-off show from this show was looking at failed TV pilots.
Yes.
And we looked at her Wonder Woman pilot. We didn't keep doing that show because no one really seemed to care. No. But maybe if we had, we would have also done this, and we would have had 2 Adrienne Palicki failed pilots. And then if we could have tracked down that Marvel's Most Wanted, I feel bad for her because she's awesome. I love her, but yeah.
Yeah, she gets the short end of the stick, as they say. Fun fact, though, the sets of this pilot were sold to the Battlestar Galactica reboot. The great reboot that I absolutely love. I love that show.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, Netflix tried it again in 2018. They did a 3-season show, which did get a proper ending. I watched the first season, and just because time has no meaning and there is, I think, an infinite amount of media to consume, I fell off of the show.
This is the question I wanted to ask you that I alluded to earlier when we were talking before we started recording. I wanted to ask you about this show because I struggled through this movie. And like I said, my girlfriend kind of tapped in and out. She came back for the end to be equally baffled by Smith with me. And then after the movie was done, I was like, well, I'm going to just throw on the trailer for this Netflix thing because I know they did it. And we both watched the trailer and said, well, that looks good. Like that looks like a better. This looks like what we wanted this to be. Like because it looks like it has a more consistent tone, and it definitely looked like the budget was better. And I remember hearing good things about it. And of course, you know what to me is like the obvious selling point for the show is Parker Posey playing Dr. Smith. I love Parker Posey. I'm a huge fan. So I did want to ask you because you said you fell off, but did you was it good? Because I have heard good things about it.
It was very good. Very good.
Okay.
And Parker Posey
I think I might actually. If anything, the one nice thing I can say about this movie is I think it made me want to sit down and watch that show. Actually,
yeah,
give it a shot.
I'm gonna plan on catching up and watching season 2 and 3. That's a short show. I love a miniseries. So
the fact that it's a rare Netflix show that got an ending too.
Yeah, exactly. But the first season was very, very good. I enjoyed it immensely. Parker Posey is the best part of the show. Inspired casting for Dr. Smith. My dad watched all 3 seasons. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Okay.
So
I'm looking forward to checking that out.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like a lot of it goes back to kind of a little bit of you know what, I might be wrong, but just bear with me. I'm pretty sure it does go back to like kind of Monster of the Week. You know, there's just still like an adventure each episode, which is cool. Obviously, there's a through line and a mystery for like the whole season as it encompasses. But it's less. I think it's less serialized than something like a Stranger Things. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. I think if you want to take like a slight victory out of this, Chris, like even
thank you for your pity.
Even though I didn't like this movie, I will say one thing coming out of it is like I want to sit down and watch that reboot show, and I think it did make me want to like finally kind of dive into some episodes of the original show.
Yeah,
because just see like because I can watch this and it's strange because I'm sure you get it. I can watch this as someone who hasn't seen that show and look at this and still be like, ooh, they're getting it wrong. You know, and I just kind of want to confirm that to see like how wrong did they get it to myself. Right. Like, yeah.
Yeah, fond memories of all of this. Fond memories of our friendship when it ended today.
Yeah, this is it. Started 3 weeks ago. It's done today. That's called a callback, Akiva Goldsman.
I was just about to say the same thing. Wow. Well, that'll do it for Lost in Space. This was a blast of a conversation. I've been looking forward to this, honestly, since we started this podcast 2 years ago. I have been so excited to talk about Lost in Space, truly. And I'm trying
to figure out in my head what is a movie that's going to be like the reverse of this. Like, what's the one that I love that you're just going to be like baffled by?
It's funny. We haven't had one of those. We've had a moderate one of that, but
Banzai, yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But either way, I've been looking forward to this, and I'm so glad we're doing this now 2 years in, because I honestly think we're actually pretty good at this. I don't want to.
I thought you were saying, because if this had been the second episode, I would have just quit. I'm too pot committed at this point.
Yeah, totally. You're in the bag, baby. But yeah, like I honestly think we're having such a blast doing this podcast, and thank you to all the listeners here. But I've been very, very excited to do this one, and I actually prepared quite a bit, and more than usual. I had to lead it a little bit in the beginning there, which I am not accustomed to, because Trev, I don't want to pat you on the back ever. But you are a plethora of information, and you're so well spoken compared to me sometimes, most of the time, and I rely on you heavily in the history of a lot of stuff, because you're an old man.
I'm an old man coming from the guy who loves the Lost in Space show from the 60s. Tell me more about your crush on June Lockhart.
Okay, well, that is going to do it for Failure to Franchise with Trev and Christmas. We love our themes. We love them so much. And we're going into a brand new theme in the new year. Now, it's kind of funny that this worked out this way.
Yeah.
Because this is obviously about a famous TV show. Well, what we are doing is we are ringing in 2023 with the ABCs of TV. Very happy about that theme, by the way. We're looking January 3rd, we're looking at the A-Team from 2010. January 17th, we're looking at Baywatch from 2017. And then January 31st, we're looking finally at Charlie's Angels from 2019. That's one I think we actively avoided just to be sure they weren't going to make another one.
Yeah. And also, I kind of actively avoided watching it in the last couple of years, just being like, no, I'd rather just save it for this podcast.
Totally. We knew right away. Right away.
Oh, yeah. This is two for me, 2 first-time watches, and a third that I saw in the theater and remember nothing about.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm very excited for this. It's going to be a great way to ring in 2023 with the ABCs of TV. So follow along at F2F Pod. That's at F2, the number 2F Pod on Twitter, Insta, all of it, all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. And rate, review, whatever you do. Star rating would be awesome. And just join the tribe and hit that subscribe. I do have one last question for you, Trev.
What's that?
If we watch Lost in Space twice, that's Lost in Space 2.
Huh?
That was a callback to the Die Hard Friends reference. I thought I was going to get you.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Fuck. Please subscribe. So yeah, this is gonna be a blast to put together. Honestly, this one was really fun for me.
I can only imagine having to sit through watching clips of this movie. So
I can't wait.
Your job.
I can't wait. I might just rewatch it again. I'm glad it's my job, you bastard.
It's baffling.